Because of the midterm, the lab should be able to help you a lot. You can either use our Project 2 solution or your own. We suggest that you use our own solution, even though I have an extra space in the word solution for some reason, so that your old bugs don't haunt you, but it's up to you. Let me just say a couple of words very quickly about Project 3. Remember B trees, B plus trees? Project 3 is about B trees. And you're not going to be using the RM as part of that. That's going to show up again in Project 4. So this is going to be the IX component, which is for B tree indexes. And you remember that B trees have non-leaf nodes and leaf nodes. And so you'll be having to deal with both of those inside this project. You will be strongly tempted to say, oh, those are just records, so I'll use RBFM to be able to go ahead and do that. Really bad idea for two reasons. It's not the same thing, and squeezing it to fit into being the RBFM is going to be an ugly solution. You've learned a lot from having done the RBFM that can tell you how you represent things that are kind of sort of reminding you of records, but neither the things that you have in the non-index pages nor the things that you have with the the data entries with the search keys and the RID using approach 2, those aren't really records either. So you'll be strongly tempted to try to use RBFM, but strongly suggest that you don't. And I'll also post something that makes it easier for you to visualize what you get when you end up printing out your B trees, which I'm asking you to do in JSON format in the assignment, so you can visualize what that JSON looks like, which again may help you. Those of you who were here on Monday, which I think is everybody, will remember that there was a midterm on Monday. We will go over the answers of that midterm briefly today, and then we will. I will return the midterms, not today because I do have this other midterm to go to, and we'll be ending early. We'll be going over we'll go over it today, and I will return the midterm on May 10th. So again, see what you can do about getting all that stuff ready. As we go forward. So we're going to talk about the system or optimizer, but first I'm going to switch over and very quickly see what I can do about going over the midterm with you. And the comment is that on a lot of questions people gave moderately vague answers, which didn't get as much credit as giving answers that actually specified a little bit more. I'm not expecting you to go ahead and give as detailed answers as the ones that I gave, but even so, I think the idea is to give sort of semi-reasonable answers that actually show that when I ask you to describe or explain, that you actually describe or explain. Anyway, you'll see how that goes when you go ahead and give the answers out. So I'm just going to end up making this bigger, and we will just go over the answers of what's on here fairly quickly. But I would like oops, that's the wrong exam that I opened. So let me open the one that is actually the one from this year. So let's just go ahead and go over that quickly here. So first of all, question 1 in a record that has fixed and variable length. Finding the value of the kth field takes time proportional to k. Anybody who did the project should know that the whole point of the project was you can find the kth field in time that's constant time, O of 1. If there are questions, please raise hands or shout out, and we'll see about going over it. And again, I don't expect as detailed answers of what I had, but when I ask you to explain, I do ask that you should explain. There's a question: operating systems have their own page/buffer management capabilities, often using LRU or other variations. Why do database management systems like to handle the buffer management themselves instead? And in your explanation, which should be an explanation, provide an example. OSs deal with lots of different applications and have to be able to cope with them, and LRU can often be a really good approach for being able to deal with the level of interest. And so things get swapped out in virtual memory based on notions of not really knowing what that application is going to do. Database systems, when you have a query plan, they know what that query plan is going to do. They know that this page is hated because it's not going to get touched again. It was all very useful when you dealt with it, but it's not going to be touched again as part of this plan. Maybe some other query is going to want it, but not this query. Whereas other pages, they know these are the pages that I want to touch next. And so, counts are good indications about their being interested of what's involved. Database system, from the operating system standpoint, it's just another vanilla application. There's nothing special about it. It doesn't know what the database is doing. It doesn't know the layout of what things are going to be touched in what sort of order. So in particular, as an example of picking victims, and this is an example that we even talked about twice, including one or two lectures before the midterm. If you have a situation with a nested loop join, where, as an example, you have 100 page frames, you have one frame that holds your outer page, you have 99 more pages for the inner, and in a really spectacularly bad kind of flooding, sequential flooding case, you have the outer page, and then you have the 99 inner pages, and then you have to be able to touch the 100th page, and what you'll do is you'll get rid of the first page that you're going to need next as part of going to the second page of the outer. You're going to go through the 100 pages, you'll get rid of the page that you need next, and that can really be very bad performance. So this is a case in which things, the database system knows what it cares about, knows what it's going to use next in the plan, and so it can end up doing a much better job than an operating system in terms of understanding what's going to be touched. This question, again, is everybody who did the project and knows the project should be able to do it well. And emphasis, I didn't ask you to find the fields within a record, but how do you find the records within a page? You have to say what an RID is, that it consists of the page ID and the slot ID. And the page ID tells you which page to get the record from, and the slot ID says which slot it's in. And here's the picture of what it looks like. Some kind of thing would end up helping, where the idea is that each of the slots gives you the offset and the length, and then given the offset and the length, you know how to find the record in the page, because you know where it's located on the page, and you know what its length is. And you can't assume fixed length records, but you can assume, per the problem, that it's on the original page, so you don't have to talk about forwarding addresses. I'll say a word about forwarding addresses after I go through the midterm. So that's the idea. You don't explain the fields. Question.
If you go up, if you swapped where it says in slots and pointed to free space, is that a problem?
No.
Okay, cool.
And you don't even have to describe the free space.
Sure.
That wasn't asked about in this problem. I'm not going to talk about how things get graded at this point. You'll be able to see the grading when they give the thing back.
Okay.
This is one where being vague and just saying, well, it uses less space. Basically, when you use mirroring, you have double space. When you use RAID with k disks, you add a factor of 1 over k, so it's 1 plus 1 over k of the amount of space that you need to be able to use. So basically that's the advantage. And you're asked to explain it just rather than just say less space. less space mean 5 bytes is, you know, how, what is the advantage? So that's what's going on. And again, what's the layout? The whole point is that you can use XOR to be able to, you know, put things together, whether you're going ahead and distributing it, you know, across different disks or otherwise where the parity disk is located. Didn't have to go into that, but you have to emphasize that the parity block is the XOR of the other blocks, and in particular, if you end up losing one of the disks, you can use XOR to be able to get the data back to see what's going on. And the example wasn't required showing the bits, but it could be helpful. The point is, again, to be able to get the repair by using the XOR to be able to get the values back. Here's again a question where being a little more precise was kind of helpful. You can always go ahead and you can split a node when it becomes full and create 2 kids for it. Why is that a bad idea? Well, the whole point about B trees is that it's log n. And if you did what's described there, especially when things come in time order, you could get a tree that ends up completely leaning to the right where it would be order n to be able to do the operations of insert and search and delete. And so yes, it's about balance, but more specifically, it's about making sure that all your operations are logged in. And by the way, B trees are not completely balanced trees. It just maintains so that everything ends up being logged to the base f of n versus n. So that is the disadvantage here of the approach given. If you traverse the leaves of a B tree, it doesn't matter whether it's clustered or non-clustered. The values that you have in the leaves of the tree are in search key order, whether it's a clustered or a non-clustered tree. That's the whole point, that you can traverse in search key order. Another true false, if you have a B tree index, then anytime the table is updated, the B tree index must be updated. That's also false because it's only the columns that are in the B tree index. Only when those are changed do you have to go ahead and update the index. Here's basically a true false or NY question. Can you do index only queries for these 2 queries with an index on department and salary? People tended to get 8B, some people got 8A wrong. Why is the answer on 8A no? Because it's select star, which means you have to get all the attributes. So the index will allow you to figure out which tuples you want, but you won't be able to get any attributes except department on salary if you go ahead and use the index and it does say select star. Yeah.
If we use alternative 1 where we store the records on the page in the index, would we still need to?
The assumption is that again the index is only on those 2 columns. If you could have asked me during the exam whether or not alternative 1 would have been a reasonable thing to do, but basically the assumption is you have the B tree index only, and the thing is it's using only the index without touching the records. So you could have asked me about that. The idea was it wasn't alternative 1. On the second one, you get everything that you want, including the count, by just using the index. Okay, this was one that I thought would be difficult for a lot of people. When using extensible hashing, if, sorry, this is actually the easy one, the hard one comes next. You only have to split a bucket in 2 and adjust the directory. You don't have to adjust any other bucket except for the one that's overfull. And the answer to that is true. You only have to adjust the one that's full. There's a later true false that's a little harder. Explain significance of extendable hashing over static hashing. Bottom line is with overflow buckets, you can end up having things that take a lot of time, whereas with extendable hashing, you end up growing your directory, and you're still going to be, assuming that you don't have terrible skew, you're still going to be able to have things that can operate in constant time for search and insertion and deletion, so that ends up being this was what I thought was one of the harder questions on the exam. When using extendable hashing, local depth always equals the global depth, or is one less than the global depth? And the answer to that is false. And the reason, as we discussed, is you're going to be splitting a bucket every time it becomes full. In a bad luck situation, you can end up having to split that same bucket, because a lot of values hash into it. You can end up having to split it twice, even though you haven't had to expand basically you can end up expanding for some particular bucket. You can end up splitting it twice. So in other words, you have a bucket where its depth was 2, but the global depth had to increase to 4. Because you didn't have to split that particular bucket because not much went into it. So some other bucket, you have to keep splitting, and you have to split it twice because a lot of stuff went into that one. But this one, you didn't have to split a whole lot. So again, you can have a situation where some things end up having a lot of things, bad luck, even when you don't have the same value appearing, all that many times. But again, it could happen because you do have the same value appearing a lot. Last question on this one. An ISAM representation is better for data that is almost never updated than it is for data that is updated frequently. Basically, ISAM is kind of the static variation of B-tree. And yeah, if things aren't changing very much, then it's good. If the data gets updated a lot, then the ISAM is quite possibly going to end up being bad. And now we get to the Snow White question. We'll talk a little bit about this one. So you have 7 values. It must be one of those 7 values. You're told it must be one of the 7 values, being the 7 dwarfs. There are n records in this table, and the RIDs are 8 bytes in length. And so if you use bitmap indexes, how many bits does it take to represent the 7 bitmaps? I'm going to give you 3 answers that are sort of okay. I'll tell you the 2 answers that I like. First of all, you've got 7 bitmaps. Each of them takes, n bits, because you've got n records. So basically, it just takes 7 n bits to be represented. Now, you can do better by having just 6n. You have full credit for the 6n, because then you could go ahead and just say that one of them you can figure out based on the others. There also is a potential answer that's a third answer, that you could have a record that was deleted. And if you had a record that was deleted, then you might want to go ahead and have another thing to represent that there was a record that was deleted. But frankly, you could figure out a record that was deleted just by having the 7 n bits. In other words, you don't have to have a bit that says the record is deleted. Basically, you'll have a 1 that corresponds to grumpy. So, you have a 1 when grumpy's in there, you have a 1 for happy, bashful, etc., etc. I'm not going to remember all 7 of those guys. But you don't, basically, for a record that's there, you just have zeros for all the different values. So even in the case where the record isn't there and it's been deleted, you can get by with 7 n bits. So full credit for the 6n, full credit for the 7n. If you said, that you had null, the problem says that it has to be one of those 7 values. And if somebody even had, 9n, that's, a little bit much, where you're trying to store whether or not the thing has been deleted as well as null. You're told it has to be one of those values. You don't extra have to have a bit for null, because it has to be one of those 7 values, and you don't even need the bit for deleted, because if it's not there, the 7 takes care of it. How many bits are there in a byte? 8, so it's 7n divided by 8 as being the number of bytes. So that's all there. And now, next part, suppose that you have, and we're talking just about the leaf pages of a B-tree index with no free space there. So, how many bits do you need to deal with that? Well, again, reasonably loose about how that gets dealt with. You only need 3 bits to distinguish among the 7 dwarf names. You don't need, all the characters that are there. You need, 3 bits to be able to distinguish among them. The RIDs are 8 bytes, so you add together, and that would be 67 bits. If you want to keep things on a byte boundary, terrific. Use a full byte for it, full credit for that. If you even want to keep things on a word boundary, that's fine. So you end up using a full word for it, and you throw that in, so that would be okay too. But having to represent things in character form would end up being really really inefficient, because all you have to do is distinguish among the small number of values, and I told you those are the only values that can exist inside them. So basically, you know, you have, let's say, you know, 7 bits times n versus in the bad case 67 bits times n. Which one is better? You know, the 6 or 7 or even 8 or 9 bits times n as a number of bits is a whole lot better than 67. So that's how that works. Question on this? Okay, let's see. This is an open-ended one, and for those of you who read over the practice midterm, this was kind of a giveaway. Basically, there are lots of good answers, and this is just one example. Why is this clustered? And you didn't have to have this exact answer. There are many good answers here, but basically. The clustered index is going to be really good for when you're trying to search a range of values. Hashing is not going to be great on that. You know, sorted file is pretty good on that one too. But you know, hashing is not good for ranges, and unclustered is potentially going to require either sort or touching lots of RIDs, and you know, searching the entire file is not good too. You go through them one by one. In the case of searching on a specific search key value, when there is at most one record matching it, the hashing is great because of the constant time that's involved. So that's going to end up being good. We can give more detail on that too, but I just wrote a relatively short one on that. And there are lots of other answers that are good. For space efficiency, you end up storing the lengths of fixed length fields in the system catalog rather than storing it in every record. That's true. Even with varchar, you store the maximum length in the system catalog rather than inside every record. Again, something that you've seen working with the projects. And double buffering, explain double buffering. We've gone over this, but basically, you don't, so it's basically answer on input and output. On input, you'd have to wait to be able to get the next block from input 17. If you ran out of the tuples in input 17, double buffering means that you have the next input, you know, ready for you, double buffering or even more. So you don't never have to wait for an input to be read in. Same thing with output. If you have to wait after your output is full to be able to write the output block, that's inefficient. So spend another block to be able to have output, so you don't have to wait while the output is being written out. Again, a relatively simple gimme on index nested loop join, and basically how does index nested loop join work? You're going to be looping through all of the, and this is the whole thing. You start off with a result that's empty for every block inside R. You're going to look at all the tuples in that block. Yeah, it's important to get the value of Ri, because that's how you're going to be able to get the matching SJs using the index. So it's important to say you use the index to be able to find the things that match on the value, and you put RS into the answer question.
I was going to ask it, or after, if you can explain why number 6 is false again?
Let me just do that very quickly, going back. And then I want to go on. I will be ending, as I mentioned. I will be ending the class a little bit early. Okay. Actually, you are quite correct. The answer that's written here, okay, thank you for stopping me. I will make sure that this gets graded correctly, and we'll adjust the grades. Good thing that I did give them back, because what I said to you explained why it was true, but the answer that's listed here is false, and to the extent that this has been graded wrong, it's going to be very simple. Nobody asked me that after I posted it. Then the answer to this one should be true. Thank you for stopping me. And I will fix the grades before they end up getting given back. So thank you for asking the question, because again, the answer to that one should be true, and again, it will be fixed before the grades are given back. So we'll go on from there. Okay, so, again, reminder to everybody, because I do have another class in which there's a midterm where hopefully the answer key is gonna be correct on that one. The answer key gets a 98, at most. Anyway, I will fix that and deal with it. I think I had used a different phrasing on this question in an exam that I gave 4 years ago, and I fixed the phrasing to make it clearer, but I didn't fix the answer to make it clearer. Thank you for asking. So let's be optimistic here and optimize. So start off by saying that the term optimizer suggests that you're finding the best plan for executing a query. No such thing.